At first, it looked like a successful interception, bright flashes, targets destroyed, then the sky filled with falling fire, and panic began. On the night of March 20th, 2026, the sky over central Israel did something residents had never seen before. At first, it followed a familiar pattern. Sirens sounded, alerts flashed across mobile phones, and people moved quickly toward shelters. For years, civilians had grown accustomed to a certain rhythm. Missiles detected, interceptors launched, flashes in the sky as threats were neutralized before impact. But this time, something changed. Instead of a single arc followed by a distant explosion, the sky began to fragment. Witnesses described multiple objects descending at once, dozens of glowing points spreading outward as they fell. What had appeared to be a single incoming missile suddenly broke apart, transforming into a scattered pattern of threats moving toward different parts of the city. For a moment, there was confusion. Then the explosions began. Across multiple neighborhoods, impacts were reported almost simultaneously. Emergency lines were overwhelmed as calls flooded in from different locations, each describing a separate blast, a separate incident, a separate crisis. This was not a conventional strike. It was the first confirmed use of cluster munitions in central Israel. And in that moment, the nature of the threat changed completely. Because the sky was no longer delivering one impact, it was delivering many. What fell from the sky that night was not a single weapon, but many. Cluster munitions are designed to transform one missile into dozens of smaller threats. As the warhead descends, it opens mid-air, releasing submunitions, often called bomblets, that spread outward before hitting the ground. Each one is small, simple, and unpredictable. Unlike guided missiles, these submunitions do not rely on advanced tracking systems or navigation. Once released, they fall freely, dispersing across a wide area. That simplicity is part of what makes them so difficult to counter. There is no single trajectory to intercept, no central target to destroy. Instead, a single incoming missile becomes a pattern of falling objects, each heading toward a different point of impact. Eyewitness accounts described exactly that. Multiple flashes in the sky, a scattering effect, then a series of explosions, rapid, overlapping, and spread across entire neighborhoods rather than concentrated in one location. For air defense systems, this creates a fundamental challenge. Interceptors are designed to destroy the main missile before it reaches the release point. But once the submunitions separate, the opportunity for interception largely disappears. What remains is a saturation effect on the ground. One strike becomes many. And the result is not a single explosion, but a cascade of impacts unfolding almost simultaneously. In the aftermath of the attack, a critical question quickly emerged. Why didn't the defense systems stop it? The answer lies not in failure, but in design. Missile defense systems like Iron Dome, Arrow, and David's Sling are built to intercept defined threats. They detect incoming projectiles, calculate their trajectory, and launch interceptors to destroy them before impact. Against single warheads or even coordinated salvos, these systems can be highly effective, but they rely on one key assumption, that the threat remains a single trackable object. Cluster munitions break that assumption. As the missile descends and the warhead opens midair, the situation changes instantly. What was once a single target becomes dozens of smaller objects, each falling along its own unpredictable path. The radar picture fragments, tracking becomes more complex, time becomes even more limited. And most importantly, the interception window closes. Once the submunitions are released, there is no central object left to destroy. Interceptors already launched cannot adjust to every new trajectory, and launching new ones becomes impractical within such a short time frame. The systems are still functioning, but they are now facing a different kind of threat, one they were not originally designed to counter at that stage of flight. This reveals a deeper limitation, not of capability but of context, because even the most advanced defense can be challenged when the nature of the attack changes. As the fragments of the attack reached the ground, the scale of disruption became impossible to ignore. In cities like Rehovot and Petah Tikva, explosions were reported across multiple neighborhoods within minutes. What might have been a single impact zone instead became a scattered pattern of damage, stretching emergency services across a wide urban area. Fires broke out almost immediately. In some locations, buildings were struck directly. In others, secondary fires ignited from debris, damaged vehicles, or ruptured infrastructure. Smoke rose from several naked across the cities, creating a fragmented and fast-moving emergency situation. Casualties began to emerge. Dozens were reported injured, some caught in the open during the strikes, others affected by collapsing structures or flying debris. Medical teams were forced to respond simultaneously to multiple sites, triaging patients under pressure and transporting the most serious cases to nearby hospitals. The challenge was not just the damage, it was the distribution of that damage. Instead of concentrating resources on a single location, responders had to divide their efforts, coordinating across multiple incidents with limited visibility and time. In that moment, the nature of the attack became clear. It had turned one strike into many, and the city itself into a complex, multi-layered crisis. As the pattern of the attack becomes clearer, it reveals a shift not just in tactics, but in strategy. The focus is no longer limited to military installations. Instead, the strikes have expanded into civilian areas where the effects are broader, more visible, and more disruptive. This marks a departure from earlier phases of the conflict where precision targeting played a larger role. Now the emphasis appears to be on saturation, coverage over accuracy. By using weapons that spread across wide areas, the objective changes. The goal is no longer to hit a single high-value target, but to create multiple points of impact, forcing emergency responses, disrupting daily life, and increasing overall pressure on the system. This evolution reflects adaptation. As defenses improve against conventional threats, offensive strategies adjust to exploit new vulnerabilities. Cluster munitions bypass interception at a critical stage, turning one incoming missile into many simultaneous challenges on the ground. The impact is not only physical, it is economic and psychological. Urban disruption affects businesses, infrastructure, and public confidence. Repeated attacks create uncertainty, altering behavior and placing continuous strain on civilian populations. At the same time, a deeper imbalance emerges. The cost of launching such attacks remains relatively low compared to the expense of maintaining and operating advanced defense systems, and over time, that imbalance becomes part of the strategy itself. As the dust settles, a more troubling pattern begins to take shape. Casualty numbers are rising, not just from the initial impacts, but from the expanding complexity of the attacks themselves. With multiple explosion sites and overlapping damage zones, the risks to civilians increase with each new strike. But the danger does not end when the explosions stop. Cluster munitions often leave behind unexploded ordnance, small devices that fail to detonate on impact. These remnants can remain hidden in streets, buildings, and open areas, posing a long-term threat to anyone who encounters them. Days, weeks, even months later, they can still cause injury or death. This introduces a new layer of concern, not just military, but humanitarian. The use of such weapons raises questions about proportionality, civilian safety, and the long-term consequences of their deployment in densely populated areas. These are not risks confined to the moment of attack. They persist, shaping the environment long after the conflict moves on. At the same time, the escalation ladder continues to rise. Each new tactic, each new method of attack pushes the boundaries further. What was once unthinkable becomes possible, and what becomes possible can quickly become repeated. That is what makes this moment so significant, because it is not just about what has happened, it is about what could happen next, and that question remains unanswered.